Hey there, my name is Joe Keyport, and you're listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. This week, I talked to Caleb Anderson, the singer-songwriter behind the band Aldrich, to talk about his new record, Another Guise. The record is Caleb really flexing his muscles as a songwriter and dives into the past, present, and his future. This episode serves as a bit of a catch-up as Caleb and I went to college together at UNW in St. Paul, so seeing his growth from the college days has been really cool to witness. We got a chance to dig into the record and Caleb's experience working with producer Con Davison. The album is out now, and a release show for Another Guise will be held at the A-Mill Lofts at 7 p.m. on Friday, October 27th. Tickets are $12. It's Aldrich, and they're right here on the Ear Coffee Podcast. Good afternoon, Caleb. How's it going?
Hey, good. Yeah, trying to stay hydrated.
Yeah, I went for a walk around North Loop this afternoon, and I just sweat to death before an eyeglass appointment. I was like, I'm so sorry.
Yes, I'm just sweating into my eyes at work.
Funny. So you are not a friend of the pod, but we have a history as we went to Northwestern here in St. Paul. You both were in audio production or recording arts, as that now defunct program is over at Northwestern.
Yeah, it was like this modified radio program, but they had a studio so they could call it that.
We were probably the one and
we were
only,
the guinea pigs.
Only class, and then they're like, yeah, we can't make this a real thing.
Right.
But it's glad to have you on. It's been fun to follow you from that into, as we kind of lived in different worlds, as you were mentioning off mic. I lived in more of a harder world, and you had the indie thing where you're doing kind of the stringier, kind of fun stuff. But yeah, so first of all, one of the opening questions I always ask is, how do you describe Aldrich to someone who isn't in the know, whether it's a coworker, a family member at Thanksgiving? What's your one sentence where you're just yeah, it's this, and then you move on because you don't want to sit there and maybe explain to your aunt what, your music is?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to think about that more because people ask, so I have that elevator pitch. But I think I've leaned back on the singer-songwriter thing because it straddles all these genres, and it's more everything's kind of bowing to the song. So it's indie pop, rock, folk influenced, but it's really more about the song, and then the arrangements kind of just grow out of that and the variety of influences I have. So, I mean, it's indie singer-songwriter is probably the cleanest way, but there's been a lot more pop influence lately. But sonically, I feel I tend to describe it as it's very, there's something tender, and then it's surrounded by a heavier backbeat and textural, quirky instrumentals. And so there's a little, a earnest vocal and a guitar performance, and then all this kind of host of quirkiness around it. I wanted to ask specifically, I don't always ask about instrumentation, but one of the instruments that kind of sits here, and I haven't been able to see you or your other band, the band you play with, Beamer, live, but the nylon string acoustic has been one that you found yourself in. Why that? Because I mean, there's a wide range of stringed instruments you can play within a pop context, but it's rare people land on that one in a more in a less classical or even a folky kind of way. Yeah, I mean, I fell in love with it with Jose Gonzalez in college, and how much he could do with that one instrument was always really cool to me. And then there's also something just of the immediacy of it, because I tend to play whatever's there. And I was playing a lot of electric guitar with a whole pedal board and everything when I the first apartment I moved into after I got married, and had a whole rig and was doing looping and kind of, I did a more shoegazy sort of self-produced record, but the tide was sort of turning in that, where I just felt with the fingerstyle stuff I was doing, it worked really well on electric, but there was just something about how I could make that instrument sing on a nylon, and I don't know, it's just sort of stuck. It's become this thing of how can I use this in different contexts? What can I put around this to recontextualize it? And so some of it's just ease, but some of it's I just sort of gradually gained an affinity for it, and then my writing was really informed by what it could do.
Yeah. It's a very tactile instrument.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of string, especially if you play fingerstyle, but you can have the more mellow, what you think of the kind of twinkly, plucky nylon sound. But if you really lean into it, or if you get some nails, you can get a much more strong attack.
Well, it can be kind of nasty too, because like the lower strings a lot of times will like rattle against the fretboard. So there's like this weird juxtaposition of like it's really tender, and then it starts to kind of get gnarly and out of like there's like a very small window before you're starting to like overplay the instrument. And so I like how I can sort of pick and choose, and it's almost like a built-in sort of overdrive, if you will, like where it's like starts to get brash. So it's really just been, there's like sometimes you play one instrument for a while, like I was doing a lot of electric, and then you just like take all that knowledge from like playing that instrument and throw it to a different instrument, and all of a sudden it like makes you think about writing in a different way. And so it's just been very evocative to play that.
Has leaving the more of electric side was that a difficult process, or was it just pretty easy to put away kind of the electric and the pedal board for the nylon string?
I mean, part of it was just like where I was living too, where it's like I was in
the knock on the door.
I mean, I wasn't getting complaints at our first apartment, but then we moved into somebody's basement, and then it just sort of phased out naturally, which I feel like tends to happen with me, where I just it starts to phase. It's like a new emphasis, and right now I'm almost feeling like I want to dabble more in steel string acoustic again. So I don't know. It wasn't like an intentional and now it's just the nylon. But there was something too with like not having a rehearsal space starting in 2020. With COVID, we decided like we're probably not going to be playing out anytime soon. So let's like not do the rehearsal space so I could play loud there. And so now with my current apartment that I've been in for the last 4 years, I had a like up on the wall a hook for the acoustic, and it was just like
it's always right there.
I don't want to like have to plug a thing in, push a button. I was right before you came, I was going to play the electric guitar I have down here for practice, and I was like, I got to find a cable. I don't know where my quarter inch is now. I just traveled. I don't know where the nearest outlet is that's available. So there's like a little bit of a laziness that sort of I fell into it, but then I just kind of fell in love with it.
Awesome. So we kind of got ahead, so I'm going to take us back just a second here. So what made you want to get into music? What was the thing that, like, when did you start listening, and what made you get from, like, listening and finding something that was your own to becoming someone who made, wrote, and later performed?
My dad's a songwriter.
Okay.
So that was always a thing. But I was sort of like guitar specifically was, like, not something I believed that I could learn. I don't know why. I just was like, that's something that dad knows how to do. I don't know. You like put him on a pedestal. And like, I could never learn that. But then I was forced to take piano lessons as a kid, as a lot of people are. But it was always sort of a like, I'm just memorizing stuff and learning it by ear. And I wasn't good at the notation and learning how to sight read. So but for a long time as a kid, it was like I was always doing something creative, whether it was like modeling clay or drawing. And I don't think it was until, I mean, even then I had like the little like kid tape recorder and would make up songs and was kind of obsessed with the idea that you could just make something up and re-experience it by like playing it back on this little tape recorder. But I didn't get serious about it until high school, and I went from being homeschooled to going into public school. And I just started doing like guitar lessons. But it was funny. I wanted to play bass more than I wanted to play guitar.
And I knew you as a bass player from Calvin Heights.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it was funny because my parents got me a guitar when I was like, I don't know, 10 or something. And it just sat in my room for like 3 years. And my friend Matthew would like play Holiday by Green Day on it every once in a while. Like when he came over, like play that, like play Holiday. And so, but then we were going to church and there was this guy who was playing bass and he like knew all the licks and stuff. He's kind of like an old school kind of guy. And so I was like, Mom, I think I'm like getting like I understand what he's doing and I like want to play bass. And she's like, we got you a guitar. You have to learn that first, which is funny. And so, yeah. But then when I went into public school in 8th grade, I actually learned how to play bass for concert band and then played upright in high school. So it was just kind of a gradual thing. And then my dad gave me like a Boss Digital 8-track around my freshman year of high school. And I fell in love with that. Just getting to see, there was a lot of YouTubers at the time who were doing like video songs where they would film themselves like recording each part of the arrangement. And so like as a kid to be able to visually see that and be like, oh, I can like do that. Like I don't think I understood how records were made before that, but to be able to see it so clearly, it was like, oh, yeah. Okay. So then I could just make up something on that instrument and like hit this thing. And so, yeah, once I got into recording, I was like writing through recording. Okay. Like I would actually not know what I was writing and I would just like track an idea I had. And then the recorder would stop and then I would like pick up another instrument and like take the song further from where I stopped it rather than like having the whole thing planned out. Yeah. So recording was a big way into it.
It's almost like a more tactile, like you came in with a more tactile or almost like a more, because you talk about you were drawing and sculpting and stuff like that. You almost kind of went kind of a more of an additive, artistic way than just like, all right, I have this idea and I'm just going to put it down.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Yeah, it's almost like I was just finding my way as I went, just like I would in a different art form. Yeah, I could see that for sure. So yeah, it's been a cool process. Like the recording then just sort of energized everything because it was like I could see how quickly like the intuition would take over, where it's like I have this one idea and I know that it has the seed for more. And so I don't know, I think it's really served me that I like started with recording because I started thinking from arrangements like a lot sooner than I think a lot of people would if they like didn't have the recording aspect of it. So
yeah. What was your first band then? Were you playing out pretty quickly or were you?
Well, so I grew up in a really small town.
Okay.
So I grew up in Long Prairie, Minnesota.
Okay.
And it's like, central Minnesota. And town of like 4,000 people. Yeah. So
not much bigger than where I grew up, Pine City. You're just like, there's not a lot of kids to play.
Nobody's really like recording. Nobody has like a DAW. And so it was really like playing at church and like playing for pep band. Yeah. Where it was like, I got to shine. You know? And then it was like in high school, I pulled together some buddies and we would just play for like the talent show at homecoming and then wait until snow days.
Yeah, wait for the next talent show for you to actually do something.
Yeah. So we had a band called Royal Crow, but really it was just like we met up for 3 of these performances. And then my senior year, I pulled similar people together and I did like my own concert in the high school auditorium. Like I got my English teacher to like endorse it. And then I like made posters and just like people like townies just showed up.
Very DIY.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then it wasn't until college that I like actually worked on like a DAW. Okay. Like recorded anything to a computer because it was like a linear digital 8-track was all that I like had access to. So as funny as our recording arts program was, I had never had access to any of that gear because it was like just a small town scenario. Yeah. So yeah, it's been cool to sort of draw on that like DIY, just figure it out and like make your own fun mojo from my childhood.
Yeah. It's like, I got an idea. We got to get it out. We're going to figure out how to get there one way or another, essentially.
Yeah. Like I never had the ideal route. So why start now? And sometimes it's interesting what comes out when you don't. Yeah. Like that becomes a characteristic of the music.
Yeah. So then when did Aldrich form? When did you start kind of performing under this moniker, or at least releasing music?
Yeah, I think it was probably 2016 when I came back from the program I did in Nashville for the end of my schooling, was when I had like a lot of these songs written, and started playing or like forming a band. But yeah, I did a self produced record.
Yeah.
And I recorded that over that was like 2017. And then 2018 we released that, and I've since pulled it down. It's only available on Bandcamp right now.
I remember like the artwork and seeing it, and just looking through like Spotify, I was like, there's like, I'm missing it's like the window or whatever.
Yeah, it's like an archway. Yeah. So yeah, that was me and my friend Ben McEwen, who played drums for Calvin Heights, a band we were in when I was in college. And it was sort of us together.
Yeah.
And then I just like did all the instruments besides the drums. And then we started pulling together a band for live stuff, and we played a basement show at Ben's house in like the end of 2018 or beginning of 2019. And so, yeah, so that was kind of where it began. It was more of a self-produced thing, and I was playing a lot of electric then.
Yeah.
And it was like a lot of like double tracked vocals and more shoegaze influence.
Yeah. So then kind of moving forward, you release an EP in 2021 under a softened gleam, and we're getting towards the release of your debut LP, which is Another Guys. And that was supposed to be originally, reading through the blurb you sent, which, side note, I love it when people do that, because I hate trying to like dig through like social media posts.
Right.
Like give me the facts here.
Right.
And that was supposed to be just a follow-up EP with 4 songs that grew from your partnership with Con Davis.
Yeah, so Con Davison and I, like, it was November of 2019, and I had like just done this house show and was feeling kind of like the DIY thing is cool, but I feel like I'm out of my depth as far as like how to grow more. And he had just posted on Instagram, like in a story, like, I know I got some tricks. Does anybody want to record songs with me? So it was kind of on a whim. I had known him from some other local bands that he was in. He was still in Bad Bad Hats at the time, but he was in this band called Dream Spook and Ancient Mariner that was like playing around when I was early college.
Yeah.
And so in my head, I'm like, that's the guy. And yeah, so we met up and recorded Under a Softened Gleam, and it just like blew my mind, because in college we would like track everything, like start with the drums and now record the bass, and everything was like recorded to a scratch vocal.
Yeah.
But the way that he was recording reminded me more of like what I would do when I would demo in Long Prairie.
Okay.
Where I'm like, I know what the song is, but as far as the arrangement goes, I'm sort of like throwing paint at the canvas and then peeling stuff back and muting things. And we also would start everything, like we started the EP with me and Ben in a room together. So we got all the drum performances where he was able to actually cue off of me in the room playing with him. And even though we didn't save any of the vocal or guitar for that EP, all the drum takes are like live. Him feeding off of my energy. And so seeing, like, walking through that process with him just kind of opened up a lot for me of just getting more confident in like, I have good songs.
Yeah.
If I track them if I take a different approach to tracking them, there's actually going to be more life in them. And I don't need to know everything about the production process. I can actually bring more people into this process and like play a smaller role or a more focused role. And then, I don't know. It's like it's more surprising because you're bringing another voice into it.
Was it hard to relinquish that control as someone who'd been very hands-on with your work, doing everything, but like giving it over to Con? Was that a difficult task? Or?
Yeah, especially at the beginning, because I didn't, he was pushing me in ways where I was like uncomfortable, or I, had done all these double tracked vocals with reverb and distortion and stuff. And then he was pushing me to like, we're going to hear like your singular performance of this section.
Okay.
And like and I was like comfortable with my voice, but he pushed it to a different level where I was able to like really appreciate a singular performance from my voice and all the idiosyncrasies of it, and like embracing that rather than sort of smearing it all together,
trying to cover up what you don't like maybe a little bit too.
Yeah, exactly. And to kind of like have things be more prominent and things be pared down too at points, like just have the arrangements be really focused. So as far as how that relates to like the follow-up EP that became Another Guys, we had done that EP and then we tracked In the Blue like during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it was sort of this thing of like, I was just testing out like, if we keep going together as like a little team and we develop like a shorthand and I develop like the trust for a producer, like what could we do next? And so that's when we kind of booked the 3 or 4 days that we had. I think it was 3 days to track what was going to be an EP, a 4-song EP. It was just kind of like, let's continue this. I'm going to have more band members be here for the recording, because for Under a Softened Gleam, I did all the bass, all the guitars, all the vocals. It was just like Hank came in on synth, Ben was playing drums. So it was just like 3 of us.
Yeah.
And I was like, this time, what if I have a bassist and have Destin play electric guitar and like I take an even more focused role than I did.
Yeah.
So it was scary, but it was like little steps, you know, where I'm like relinquishing that control and being surprised by my own music.
Yeah. What did you learn about yourself as a songwriter in that way as you were giving things up and having that more focused role within what is Aldrich?
I mean, I think I recognized that I had a lot more like preconceived notions about what it should be, and that was keeping me from like exploring what it wanted to be. And so you can kind of approach it where you have like, you want it to just be able to be right and to be able to like guarantee that what you're going to have is good.
Yeah.
And that sort of keeps you from being open to what the song is asking to be or what the arrangement could be, even like genre stuff. Like it was like, oh, but I'm doing like, you know, for Under a Softened Gleam, I was like, but I'm doing more like a shoegaze thing, or I'm doing more like, I wanted it to sound like Deer Hunter or something like that, you know? And so it was like rubbing against this idea that I had of myself, but it was like more true to the song and the sentiment of the song. So yeah, so I learned that there's sometimes you can just get in your own way with sort of having an idea. So for Another Guys, we actually did less pre-production because I didn't want myself, like the songs were written and the songs were good and I like wrote charts and everything. But as far as the arrangements went, like we did like a night where Khan was there and we all just kind of like tried stuff, but we didn't like stay on anything for super long or like get any parts like super figured out because I didn't want what happened on Under a Softened Gleam, where I was like, I had such a preconceived notion that when I was challenged to like think about it in a different way or play it faster or deliver it vocally in a different way, I was like so gridlocked into what my expectation of what the song was supposed to be. So it was cool with this record to like be like, even in the pre-production, I'm like not hands off, but more open-hearted to like what it could be.
Well, cool. And so what were those 4 original songs that you had like set out to record?
We recorded Pedal Break first, and then Appetite, which is going to come out in July. And then a really weird song, which I don't know why we did this one, but it's called Sleeper Be at Rest. And it's like this kind of like sci-fi 70s ballad.
Yeah.
It was very much like I want to indulge this whim. So we recorded those 3 and then Quarter Century, which I had demoed Quarter Century during the pandemic. So I had a whole version of that. And so those were the 4 tunes we like set out to record. And then I think it was like the second day of 3, like almost everybody had left except for Reese, our drummer, and Matt, our bassist. And Con was like, well, what else you got? And we just like played this tune called An Overlap, which is like about the moon and has very much like a picture song.
Yeah.
And it turned out really cool. I'm like, oh, now we have 5 songs. And it was also like the type of song where like if it's an EP that you're doing that's 4 tracks and you're like paying for studio time and paying like a producer, like you're not going to like put it at the top of the list. But like if it comes out in extra time, it's a different matter. And then like you're like, this is something that I wouldn't have chosen to explore. But an album sort of affords you like to go down all these rabbit trails and like try different permutations of what the band could sound like. And so I think that one was sort of like, this is a bucket list thing, like do a full length album. And this weird song came out of this random evening. Like we should do a full length album and see what else we got inside us.
Yeah. So talk to me about writing this record, because a lot of these songs really kind of deal with where you sit kind of within life, whether it's retrospectively and kind of embracing those things, especially you think of like the first 3 songs on the record, and then moving kind of into the future, or where you sit now and into the future. Talk to me about where you were pulling from and kind of where you were at as you started to build up this record.
Yeah. No, that's a great framing already. Yeah, the first 3 tracks are sort of like these grappling with, I feel like Under a Softened Gleam is like a coming of age thing. And so was Hindsight, the self-produced record.
Yeah.
And this is sort of like almost putting a bow on that chapter of like, it's like the coming of age after the coming of age of like, that's right, you've already come of age. Like you've been an adult for a while now, but there's something about like lingering still and sort of like a longing for some of the pieces of my childhood that I feel like are still very much a part of me, and I want to figure out how to appropriately like bring them into who I am today. And so it's sort of this like, I don't want to regress, but I would like to keep the things of value. And so there's sort of like a continuation of the song Frozen Still from Under a Softened Gleam, where it's like a mourning of my past, but also a sort of a deep cherishing. So there's those 3 songs with Pedal Break, Leaves Turn, which is a song about my parents, and then Quarter Century, which is sort of like, have I missed the train?
But that's like the chorus on that, like in a century we'll be dead, but a quarter century I'm still here, is probably one of my favorite lines from the whole record.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I think Leaves Turn and Quarter Century are 2 of my favorites off the album, and I'm excited that they're not singles because I just love that they're like this treat that people will get to be surprised by. Yeah, and so there's sort of that grappling with like where I am now, and then there's also like a number of songs that are about like a spiritual reintegration, sort of like these are the things I was handed as a kid. I've sort of sifted through, and a lot of this I want to keep, and a lot of this I want to like let fall away.
Is that Sleep at Rest a little bit? Then?
Sleep or Be at Rest is that? It's sort of like it's sort of like a tongue in cheek thing where it's like this self-aggrandizing, like mythic retelling of sort of like, I don't know, a creation story, but also sort of the like struggle of like, I just want to leave. You know, sort of an escapist sort of thing. And so it's funny because it's very tongue in cheek in that way. And I thought that sort of like 70s ballad thing really lent itself to this sort of melodrama of it. So it's that, and then Folding is like sort of like about how embodiment is now a part of my spiritual practice, and like growing up where like anything physical was sort of seen as evil, like this dualistic thing, and then anything that's like of the spiritual realm has like a cleansingness to it, and instead of being like, I think there's more like divinity in humanity than we expect.
Okay.
So that song is one of those kind of spiritual ones. I mean, the title track, Another Guise, is sort of that, where basically it's the whole record is like the tension between holding things dearly and holding things loosely.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that there are things that inform who we are, but at the end of the day, like what falls away and who's like the core of who we are, because there's all these things you put on top of yourself, like I'm a musician, or I'm a this or that or the other thing.
It's your external kind of little shield,
exactly.
Face.
Yeah, and so just sort of like letting that drop. And I mean, the process of like recording the album reflects that, where it's like, I'm gonna let the facade of like I have all the answers musically drop and see what remains.
And what did remain for you once you kind of process, you worked through this? What did you find was left as you let that drop?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a vulnerability that doesn't necessarily go away, and allowing that like tension to just exist. And it's not always about like resolving tension, and that there's power in being able to like remain in that space.
Yeah.
Where you want to have an answer, or you like, you know, you express something to somebody, but then you want to like give all the caveats that make them feel better, but then you soften like what message you're trying to say. So it's stuff like that where it's like, how can I lay this bare and then like let it sit there and trust that those around me are going to like have my best interest and receive it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you, obviously I'm assuming you've probably shown this record to some people who are close to you. Have they been like, what's kind of been that feedback then, is you kind of talk about setting things out and letting it, hope that they kind of are able to let it sit there. What has that been? Have you been able to do that, or? Yeah.
I mean, listening through it with my parents was like a big deal. I was definitely, there were tears shed there. Yeah. I mean, even just like this, it's like a song about my parents in the second track, and a song about like where we lived for 17 years in the first track. And so like right there in the first two songs, it's like heavy hitters emotionally. Which is funny because I think the way it's all presented makes it very, like there's all these dashes of levity too. Like whether it's like musically, there's a sort of like musical jokes inside of it. And I think what it does is it sort of shows somebody like, this is very intimate, and I'm like not taking myself too seriously.
Yeah.
And not a way that like discredits it, but in sort of a way that's like, it's safe here. Like, like, isn't it funny how we have these intense emotions? Like, I don't, not to disqualify them, but almost to like continue to validate them.
The humanity of it.
Oh, we all are going through this. And like, we can, I mean, that's what a lot of humor comes out of us all being like, yeah, that's me too. And isn't it like ridiculous that we find ourselves where we do?
Yeah.
So yeah, showing it to my parents was a huge deal. I mean, showing it to my wife was cool. I mean, it's the last song is a love song, and it's always fun to like see her react to that. And she's been with me for so much of the journey that it's also like she knows the context behind a lot of the songs. So there's just like a deep sort of resonance there with getting to watch her sort of process all the songs and have them come at her. So I've had a lot of friends who are going through like similar things, whether it's they just started going to therapy and the lid on things are starting to come off, and so they're also feeling how raw the nerves can be when you actually decide that like I'm going to be vulnerable as a posture in my life. So that, I think that's always really encouraging to see that like other people who are also sort of on this pursuit are feeling a connection with it in that way.
Well, totally. I did want to kind of shift a little bit here. I wanted to talk a little bit more about a couple of the songs on the record.
Sure.
We're not going to do a track by track. We're not Song Exploder or whatever.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask about it, the release of In the Blue, just because not only do you release kind of the song, but you have a kind of almost like how Beamer did it with, I can't remember the song off the record off the top of my head.
Oh, for Sounds Like they did, the versions.
Yeah, you kind of do a similar thing with that one where you worked with Johnny Darko. You have some demos plus the Garland, which is Hank's solo piano project. So talk about what was your want to kind of have those different options for listeners, and how did you kind of connect with? I mean, Johnny Darko, obviously we know Hank Donato. There's a reason why you're connected with Hank Donato.
Right.
Like, how did you connect with those people?
I mean, it was a thing where Hank had the idea to do the Sounds Like EP and do multiple versions, and In the Blue started as like a demo during lockdown, and I really liked the demo that we made.
Yeah.
We sort of did a thing where I recorded a bunch of it. I didn't have my gear back from the rehearsal space I was renting at the time. So I recorded a lot of it like into a MacBook Pro mic, like onboard mic. So it has this weird sort of like bit kind of like, you can hear the noise gate and it's a really bad noise gate, but it's kind of a vibe. And so then I would record like a little version with like my own little drum loops and stuff. And I sent that to the drummer who I was working with at the time, Ben McEwen and Hank. And then they like remotely, without like, I didn't ask them to do anything in particular. I was just like, surprised me. And they both sent me stuff like irrespective of one another. And then I sort of cut together that version. And it was cool because I was using what I learned since we had just worked with Con for the first EP. So I was like kind of in love with that little version. It was kind of like dingy and dorky and reminded me of like Animal Crossing. And I was like, people have to hear this. So then I thought about that, and then I was like, well, Hank could do a version of one of these songs. And then Destin and I had been like getting together to play guitar just during lockdown every once in a while. And he would like come up with the harmony part for the melody that I was playing on fingerstyle. And I was like, this is really cool. We got to do this. So, but then, Johnny Darko, like, I just been a fan of some of the stuff that he'd been collaborating with Hank for Garland for the Deer. And I thought like, got to have a remix. And so it kind of rounded it all out to have like something that was sort of like totally out of the realm. But yeah, I don't know. I think it was kind of a fun way to like infuse the lead up to the release for the album with like a sort of a creative, like, I don't know, we're just trying stuff, like, check it out. And I think that's the thing too, is when you're an artist, you like create all these versions of a song that a lot of people don't ever hear. I don't think everybody should release like all their demos. No. I think there's like something to be said of like curating a presentation of a song. But I don't know, it felt like it sort of had all of them had their own little merit.
Yeah, no, it was fun to listen to each of them, like, as we were kind of throughout the day. It was like, the different versions and each little spin on it. I also wanted to ask about the title track, Another Guys, as like production-wise, it's very much a departure from the record. It's simplistic. I think it's just you and a guitar, and it's got this warbly tape quality. I'm assuming, was it recorded analog?
It was recorded on like a little memo tape recorder, just on like a stand in front of me.
Do you record a tape a bit? Do you, or is that?
My dad gave me like a Tascam. TR. Wait, is it the 424? I think it's like the blue one. It's like a 4-track. So I did record a project with a duo called Sam and Jay this winter, but that was kind of my first foray into doing like a full production on tape. But yeah, the summer winter studio we were at had this little memo recorder, and so I like knew I really wanted this song, and it was more of a vignette, sort of just a really, I don't know, it's more of a poem song. It's sort of like the poem happens and then the song is over. It was was like a song where it's like, I know I want this on here, and I want it to feel like when I wrote it, just sitting on my bed at home during the pandemic, like trying to collect my thoughts.
Yeah.
And I think that representation of it has that effect.
And it kind of goes back to that, even down to the production, because I'm someone who hears the instrumentation before I'll probably recognize what the words mean.
Yeah, same.
But like the fact that it's such a bare bones kind of leads to that stripping bare and kind of leaving what's left.
Yeah, I mean, you're making more connections than I had even. I mean, that's the thing too, is like there's all this like intuitive where you just sort of like, we're gonna do it this way. Like it wasn't necessarily like this huge thematic thought, but then it like serves the thematic element too. I mean, I'd been listening to a lot of Angelo De Augustine, some of his like earlier records where he just recorded like to 2-track tape with like 2 performances, and it's just like guitar and vocal and sometimes like a little piano. And so that song was sort of in that vein. So the whole tape warble and things like really just added to sort of what was inspiring me at the time too.
Yeah. So talk to me, we're kind of rounding down here from a lot of the big intensive questions here for the record. But talk to me about some of your favorite moments from working on this record, because you expanded the cast of characters. You're working with Con Davidson. Like, what was some things that you pull, like when you think back about making Another Guys, that you kind of smile about, or is something that's striking to you?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, one of those magic moments was, I mean, we recorded so much of it live as a band together. Okay. So I think like right away, just having all my friends surrounding me and recording Pedal Break and being like, it comes together so fast when you're like all recording at once. So I know that just like the beginning of it is always exciting, where you're just like, this is going to be a different trip than, 3 of us or just me alone. But then recording an overlap where it was like this feeling that we could just hop in the room and try something. And it was one of those where I played a Fender 6, so it's like a
6-string bass.
Yeah, 6-string bass. And then Matt was playing bass and Reese was playing drums with like a bunch of stuff just laid on the drums. And it was one of those things where almost like a chamber group where you like are listening to each other really closely. Yeah. No click. Yeah. For like a lot of the record, there's no click. And just that feeling of sort of like hanging on each other and like having to listen so intently and sort of merging all together into one thing. That was a really exciting moment. And then I think about the second batch of days that we did, because we recorded, for 3 days and then had a few months, and then I was writing and finishing some stuff. And we were kind of banging our heads doing overdubs for one of the songs. We were like banging our heads against the wall, sort of like, what does this need? And we were like, let's get the vibraphone out, and like, just like sort of at our wit's end, like trying to figure out what the song needed. And it was like, okay, let's just go get dinner. Yeah. And we came back and we're like, let's do something completely different. Yeah. And I had this song, Flash in the Pan, which is a love song and sort of similar to Quarter Century in that it has like this zooming out perspective of like, how long are we really here anyways? And we decided to like do it 2 guitars and an upright bass, and like no headphones, no click, standing around. Like, I have really nice mics in my guitars, so we like DI'd those and like put a mic in the center of the room. And it was this thing where like we hadn't planned to do it that way. I had actually like demoed out like more instruments at a point. But it became this sort of thing of like, we're all discovering that this is what this song is together. And I remember even just like practicing as we were getting set up for all the miking and everything, like just feeling like elated that with what the other guys were doing and how it was adding to this song that I had written very recently. And so there's like moments like that where it's like stuff is so fresh and it's also, it feels like it's connecting. Yeah. Those were some of the, I think, my favorite moments in the record, where it's just like we're discovering this little treasure.
Yeah. Where does like Aldrich go from this record? Because obviously the record's not out yet. So when is it out?
It should be out September 29th.
Okay.
I think it's the last Friday in September.
Wonderful. So like what kind of, so obviously this will be cut. This will obviously come out around the time the record comes out.
Sure.
What's kind of the next look then for Aldrich as you got the record done, you've kind of been able to sit on these songs, maybe played them a little bit. Where do you go from there? Now that you've expanded this world.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because as an artist, I mean, you probably relate to this where you're sort of already like living in the next reality, or like some sort of, there's like a blob form of it. It's got some of the colors of what you know the next thing will be, but it's not fully formed.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we've recorded these songs over a year ago.
Some of them have existed since 2020.
Exactly. So, I mean, yeah. So I think I want to do something. I have a couple ideas of things that I want to explore. Like, I feel like whenever I'm working on a project, there's always like these things that filter in where it's like, let's try this. I really would like to do like a more solo, very low key, maybe all to tape, maybe only 4 tracks. Who knows?
Yeah.
Like an EP or where it's more like really songwriter focused, very like guitar and vocal performance focused. I mean, even just doing like, I did a little porch version of Drenched in Summer for like a little promotion. I did a little live version of it just on the Memo tape recorder. And I love the intimacy of that. And I think it'd be a different type of creative challenge for me. Another thing I want to try is like doing random collaborations, like trying just some singles with, with Hank for Beamer. I'd like to do a song with him, and then the guitarist in Beamer, Luke Enyart, has his own music, and he does sort of like a yacht rock kind of thing. And I think between the three of us, I want to do like a dancey kind of tune.
Yeah.
So trying to just like do some co-writing with people who I haven't really worked with, and see what comes out. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what's next.
This could be the next thing. It all could go out the window. Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah. I mean, Con lives in Texas now, and part of me is like, it'd be kind of fun to just drive down there or fly down there, and even if it's just me and him, like track a 2 or 3 song EP, and just for fun. I mean, I dabbled too with the idea of going back to doing some self-production now that I've learned from him, and then maybe I produce it and have him mix it. Yeah. Or we'll see.
Yeah. The living in the moment, it's already kind of past, is something that like Dylan from my band, he's like some of these songs are about 5 years ago. I just won't be done. Like, can this be out now?
It's a dangerous trap. Like, I feel like I have to remember that. I don't know. Like, even today, this morning, I listened to the record and it got me excited and reconnected to it again. And I think that's part of why I don't think I'll ever like play out like tons, because I feel like I need like 2 or 3 months in between shows to really like get it back to the point where I feel excited to share it again. But I'm really proud of it. I mean, even it's definitely like there was a lot of moments where it's like a warts and all thing. So there's a vulnerability even in sharing this album, in that like a lot of the vocals are live, and you know, if I was recording it myself, I'd probably redo certain things, but there's sort of like an embrace of the nature of what it is that still keeps it exciting, of like, are people gonna dig it? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Final questions here. We always kind of leave a little section for like shout outs, what bands locally or like regionally that you're psyched on, that you want people to know about. And sometimes people pull out the Spotify at this point and just like look up. But
our producer Con Davison just put out a single that is so great. I'm very into that. I was like listening to it on repeat on my way here. This is like older music, but I've been listening to Closing Time by Tom Waits.
Oh, yep.
It's just like these like barroom ballads, and it's like an upright grand piano, which is like more kind of like unruly, and it rings out, and there's something so endearing about that record that I've been really into. I'm trying to think locally. I'm really into this band that doesn't really play around at all, called Kansas Plates.
Okay.
They're like indie instrumental group, but their most recent thing, like there's like a lot of slide guitars, but then their most recent thing, like they have a sax player.
That's cool.
And so it's got like this weird indie rock, but jazz, but like alt country instrumental, like this weird cross section.
Yeah.
And I'm way into that. I mean, they put out a record. I think that record they put out in 2021, but
nice.
Yeah, and then Luke Enyart, who plays guitar for Beamer, that record is great. Just like super, like all these earworms, and he's a stellar guitarist, and he also did all the production. So there's sort of that, I don't know, there's something when the songwriter does the production and it's done well that like it just has this cohesion that you can't get. And then another local artist, J.E. Sunday.
Okay.
He's doing like, I don't know, reminds me of like Andy Schauf, kind of indie, quirky singer-songwriter stuff with sort of low-key band. He just put out a record called Alice, Gloria, and John that I really love.
Well, awesome. Well, cool. That is all of my questions. The record's called Another Guys. It'll be out either in a few days from listening to this, or it'll have just come out. Caleb, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. The record's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, thanks for having me.
The Ear Coffee Podcast is a companion to the blog of the same name. If you like this episode, please leave us a rate and review so we can stand out among the other music podcasts. You can follow us at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @Ear Coffee. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.